Remember the Bloodline? Of course you do. They were WWE's version of the Avengers or the Sopranos, depending on the day. And on occasion, the honorary Usos, Sami Zayn, they were the thing in wrestling that people were talking about as WWE gained a mountain of new popularity. The group turned the tribal chief Roman Reigns into the star that WWE had always hoped he would become and gave fans years of absolute cinema. Wow, that cinema phrase really got played out, but it was played up for all the right reasons. As the group faded away and was replaced by Solo Sikoa's led MFTs, which just doesn't hit the same, let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Yeah, this is Sportskeeda Wrestling. I'm Kevin Kelm. I have a beard like Sami Zayn, but you have an opinion and I want to hear it. Let's get into it. Let us tell you why ending the Bloodline saga might have been WWE's most recent big mistake. Maybe you think otherwise. Well, let's acknowledge that in the comments. Yes, did WWE back off the Bloodline too early? Or did it run its course? Let us know how you feel in the comments below. Before we get any further though, hit subscribe. Come on, help us get up the ladder on the internet wrestling ladder. Yeah, subscribe. We would tremendously appreciate it and help us get to 200,000 subs. Thank you. Let's get into it. We all know the Bloodline started at the point where Roman Reigns returned to WWE in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic, with Paul Heyman surprisingly at his side as his counsel, finally reinventing himself as a villain who believed his own astronomical ego and entitlement. He became the WWE Universal Champion by beating The Fiend, manipulating his cousin Jey Uso, then Jimmy Uso into his ranks, then begrudgingly accepting Sami Zayn's allegiance, and finally Solo Sikoa, who thankfully showed up and ruined Drew McIntyre's life, and Cardiff and all of those people at some point protected him as the champion. Yeah, he would not be the champion for all the time that he was without their help. They had some of the best chemistry we'd ever seen in a stable in WWE, likely due to their existing family and friendship connections outside of the ring, though Sami Zayn's wacky antics and underdog babyface within their ranks was a contrast that added levity to the group when they were seemingly so serious, and it added different perspectives to the family circle. Then we had one of the most acclaimed and creative minds and orators in pro wrestling, the conniving and scheming Paul Heyman, who was so delightfully slimy and over the top that you couldn't help but hate him just a little bit or a whole lot. Yeah, a good hate though. The man was walking around and talking like a combination of Varys from Game of Thrones or Newman from Seinfeld, delightfully evil and blatantly untrustworthy. The group overall had so much potential for internal feuds as well as external ones, challenging each other, falling out, making up, abandoning each other, maybe turning face or turning heel. The group dynamics were quite prolific with the Bloodline, with all of these players in one group adding a lot more weight to every match they were outside of it, giving this grand unifying web of stories to follow throughout WWE. There were a million things to do with the Bloodline, and WWE did most of them in fairness, but it's also arguable that there could have been a lot more. It's a pretty shallow argument to present, especially in retrospect. With the group pretty much wrapped up, they were consistently popular and a ticking time bomb from a storytelling point of view. It's combustible elements and eventually things blow up. And they could have let the time bomb, though, tick a little bit longer as well. The downfall truly happened when Roman Reigns disappeared from WWE television following his humbling loss and the finish of Cody Rhodes' story at WrestleMania 40. An incredible ending and a loss really for the Bloodline as a whole because they failed to keep the title on their tribal chief. Jey Uso went off to become a single star in his own right. Sami Zayn obviously was away from the group for a long time since WrestleMania 39, so it was left to Solo to take charge, along with Jimmy Uso adding Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa, whose reception was seen as divisive, and this wasn't the Bloodline you grew to enjoy, but a distorted new version that was unruly and uncalculated with new faces, but still deep Polynesian family lines within pro wrestling making up its new ranks. The new Bloodline terrorized Paul Heyman as he got no reply from Tribal Chief, please, I'm calling you, and they even put him through an announce table in New York City, something that would ultimately end their pairing for good. This set Solo's intentions to oust Roman Reigns as the leader of the group in his absence, and they even added the long whispered of Samoan werewolf Jacob Fatu to their ranks in a big way when he showed up in a dangerous, mythical scene at the end of a SmackDown, laying out Cody Rhodes through a table. The new Bloodline stood tall and stood strong. WWE had a new Bloodline that maybe went in a half-assed pursuit of Cody Rhodes and the championship, even showing up at War Games with Bronson Reed in their ranks. The OG Bloodline versus the new Bloodline, and the OG Bloodline of Roman Reigns getting a favor through Paul Heyman setting it up with CM Punk backstage. It was quite the War Games match, but the peak of Solo's led Bloodline was in crushing defeat. Yes, their biggest moment was getting their ass kicked inside that big cage match. But it was evident from the start, despite the excelling terms of where Solo was going, comparing his Bloodline to the other one was just not gonna match up. The drawing power wasn't there. And Solo, while talented and interesting in his own way, couldn't be compared to Roman Reigns, and maybe that wasn't the idea. Roman Reigns reclaimed the Ula Fala on Raw's Netflix debut in January 2025, emphatically defeating Solo in a Bloodline Rules match. And that was it. The surging and very popular quickly with fans Jacob Fatu was pursuing the WWE US Championship, an attempt to establish himself as a solo star. Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa were unfortunately written off TV with various injuries, and JB Uso eventually left the group, rejoining his brother Jay later in 2025. Paul Heyman would realign himself with Roman Reigns, then CM Punk, and then eventually form a new group with Seth Rollins in the Vision in a main event betrayal angle that would play out through WrestleMania 41 and beyond. The Bloodline was completely split, with Roman Reigns going solo as the OTC, making occasional appearances, mainly for surprise pops, and limited due to his part-time schedule to help out fellow good guys, yeah, he was now a good guy, and in some cases, have his shoes stolen. He's had his problems with Paul Heyman, Seth Rollins, Bronson Reed, but he feels directionless. It doesn't feel like he has one set line that he's going to, and that part-time schedule and him not being there all the time also complicates everything. Like he's fighting them because he's got no real title to pursue. Should he go after the world title again? And would him winning the world title matter as much as it did before when he had a record-breaking run with it? See, there's a lot of expectations that are hard to meet. Roman shows up, he gets beaten up, he gets his shoes stolen, he gets carried out, then repeat the process 2 weeks later, then another giant return pop. It's repetitive, and the limited schedule we keep going back to feels very different with Roman Reigns as a hero now. When he was a heel, hiding behind his family who did his dirty work for him in his absence as a part-time world champion, it made his TV performances and matches being limited to premium live events more meaningful. That's not to say that he's meaningless now. No. Maybe it's just hard to fathom that Roman Reigns, dare we say, means less than he did before. And this is Roman Reigns, one of the most interesting, captivating, and popular superstars that WWE has produced in the last 10 years. And it was all an anchor with him in the WWE world title scene, in the overall creative picture, that web of stories that played out from underneath him with the Bloodline. Yes, it made him the face of the company in the most significant way. The Bloodline put Roman Reigns on the island of relevancy, as Paul Heyman dubbed it, and that's becoming a whole lot clearer following the demise of the group. He's still Roman Reigns. He just doesn't feel as needed as he used to be with regards to WWE's overall storyline week to week. And that's a problem, because a star of his caliber should always be an important presence in the main event scene or right around it. This drop-off and a lack of storylines for Roman Reigns that have the same bite might also have something to do with the face turn since his demise of the Bloodline, the faction that built up him as a villain. And we're not saying you can't cheer for the villains. A lot of people love Darth Vader. But as WWE's programming in the last 10 to 12 years has taught us nothing else, if you're a diehard fan, maybe you already know this, it's that Roman Reigns works better as a heel than a babyface. When he's allowed to be mean, when he's allowed to be unbridled in his emotions, when he doesn't have to have a moral compass, Roman Reigns is a lot more compelling, intimidating, and charismatic. He still drops the occasional bombs in the promo, but some of his Bloodline promos were legendary and will be memed probably for decades to come. Now he just sort of feels like a middle-of-the-road good guy playing the hits like he was in the Big Dog days. Yeah, with a whole lot of cringy things that you might be able to Google. Sorry to bring up the Big Dog. Believe that. And maybe WWE letting this all slip through their fingers by featuring him so sparingly and in roles that, as we mentioned, don't have the same explosiveness is just so clear. It's hard to follow up these expectations and get it to grow upon them. But it seems to be a common problem in the Triple H era, especially with regards to main event good guys. WWE seems to be making the same kind of mistakes to replace the Bloodline by trying to anchor their programming around Seth Rollins, Paul Heyman, and their new faction, The Vision. There's a parallel pattern of formula that you can compare to the Bloodline, pairing a former Shield member with Paul Heyman and building a faction around him. The addition of Becky Lynch is certainly a unique move, and it even opened the door for AJ Lee to make a very well-received return to WWE after 10 years away. But early on, younger members of the Vision group, Bronson Reed and Braun Breaker, are not showing the same type of personality and fluid chemistry that the Usos, Sami Zayn, and even Solo Sikoa did, likely due to the lack of just natural family chemistry and a lack of combined experience. It also doesn't seem like the Vision is going to be a merch-selling machine like the Bloodline was either, whose numbers spoke for themselves. It's hard to imagine the Vision releasing a new t-shirt or hoodie design that seems like every other single week that the Bloodline was doing, but that's a different conversation. Doesn't mean that they're not entertaining or don't play their role in a practical week-to-week sense. It just means that it's not as adaptable, maybe not as interesting as the Bloodline were. And obviously the Vision is still a new group, and we could be wrong about this in a year. But that's where we are right now. The Bloodline did have a bigger, longer build with more creative freedom in the early days of WWE's big top-down changes with Triple H pushing things ahead. And they were maybe even limited and kind of benefited from the Thunderdome. That was when the audience still came back and was longing for all these things they were watching on TV when not able to attend shows in person. As Sami Zayn versus Roman Reigns in Canada gave out, to Solo Sikoa's debut in Cardiff, and the two main events of WrestleMania 39 in Los Angeles were evident, and then WrestleMania 40, Roman Reigns versus LA Knight, the two consecutive War Game main events. There were so many matches built out of the fallout of the Bloodline that you could see how meaningful the group is. The breakup of the Bloodline also led to the ill-fated Jimmy versus Jay Dude Wipe sponsored match at WrestleMania 40. A brother versus brother match at WrestleMania 40 on paper sounds awesome, but yeah, that one didn't deliver on expectations for a lot of different reasons. The incredibly divisive Jey Uso world title reign the following year. A lot of fans wanted it, and then some fans online just wanted to turn on it because maybe they were just missing the Bloodline. I think everyone can agree at this point the Usos do their best work as a tag team. That isn't to say that Jey isn't incredibly popular and compelling as a superstar, yeet, with a cool catchphrase, yeet, and a cool entrance, yeet. Jey has a lot of real estate in the hearts of fans, so him breaking away from his brother, the Bloodline, and chasing the world title was well received by a lot of fans, but maybe just the way it happened and falling out from the Bloodline, maybe just in retrospect, it may have not just been the right time. Maybe it was a little bit too rushed. Maybe it needed a longer, simmering cook to get to than the one we got, which is easier to bring up in retrospect. At the very least, we could have avoided the Dude Wipes match, if nothing else. No problem with Dude Wipes, they support you in ways that I don't have to elaborate on. A match between Jey and Jimmy should have been great, but also suffered from setbacks at the hands of maybe some short-sighted booking decisions in the bigger picture of everything going on at the time, and there were bigger things going on even within the Bloodline. Had the group continue, we might have seen Jacob Fatu as a Bloodline leader, a Samoan werewolf warlord king, something that has maybe subsections of the fans were clamoring to see since his debut. Yes, fantasy booking is hard to fulfill for everyone. Instead, he worked out a little while alongside Solo Sikoa, then turned on him and got the US title, then lost the US title, and then meandered in the mid-card for a little while, which may have robbed him of his mythical aura that he had upon his big WWE debut. At one point, it seemed like Jacob Fatu was poised to take on Roman Reigns and Solo Sikoa as the head of the table. But that table seemingly no longer exists within WWE, or at least it looks a lot different than the one WWE is even able to present. The group does technically still exist in some form of Solo Sikoa's new MFTs, featuring him along with Tama Tonga Loa, the former Jeff Cobb, now JC Mateo, and the giant Tala Tonga. Though technically the same lineage, MFT just doesn't hit the same as previously noted. But at the same time, if they're going to be a completely different group, you're now looking at the third branded Bloodline. You don't want to be the third string of the Bloodline. Yeah, you do have to give it a new name, just for practical purposes. Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa have been two of the most divisive Bloodline members, despite their tag team championship glory, and Tala Tonga is still a pretty unproven WWE performer at the moment. JC Mateo, with his reps overseas, arrived in WWE with a lot of hype. But this version is a million miles away from the Jeff Cobb we saw outside of WWE, and he's really just playing a strictly supportive role. Very restrictive for a former Olympic wrestler who we know is capable of something better than what we're getting. Yeah, we're talking about the Jeff Cobb we got in Lucha Underground and New Japan Pro Wrestling. Look for those matches online, they rip. Now he's kind of Solo's bouncer or bodyguard, often not being given a chance to shine and just be behind Solo while he wears a turtleneck. You can't help but wonder if things would have been better if these talents were introduced alongside the Stardust rub of Roman Reigns. Yeah, under that Bloodline banner, like Solo Sikoa once was, and actually could have benefited from a little bit longer. But you know, things didn't play out that way. Like I said, we're looking at this in retrospect. Solo has arguably not been ready to be the leader of a group, but was popular and thriving as an underling of Roman Reigns, and there would have been no arguments from anyone if he stayed in that role for a little while longer, maybe even a year. Instead, they've got a man who's only a few years deep into his main roster career, leading a group of family members who are more or less completely unfamiliar to most of the WWE audience, who were supposed to replace the more popular and established names in this faction in the original version. But like I mentioned, maybe the new group is supposed to get that heat. Yeah, it's definitely not Solo's fault. It is the story as it played out. It had its benefits, but it's the fault of WWE creative overall in the eyes of some fans for this mishandling of some members of the Bloodline group post-breakup. Like we said, those expectations become so big and become so hard to meet and acknowledge. That includes the OTC, the individual Usos, the Solos, also the new family members, Jacob Fatu, even Sami Zayn, who hasn't had a whole lot to do since, despite, though, defeating Gunther for the WWE Intercontinental Championship. That was pretty cool. And without mentioning The Rock, who certainly had a claim to the Bloodline throne and a seat as the head of the table or the final boss or whatever you want to call him, it even seemed like Rocky would face Roman Reigns in a showdown at some point for control of the family. But as the group is currently disbanded and The Rock is dropping some serious weight to pursue different movie roles, it doesn't seem like he's getting back in the ring anytime soon, if you smell what he is cooking. But here's the good news. The Bloodline will probably come back because WWE loves a long-awaited return of a departed star or group. With that mega pop and subsequent merch sales and new match possibilities and a fresh reshake-up, 2025's return of AJ Lee proves that the 50 million reunions of groups like D-Generation X and even The Shield over the years are evidence of that. Fans want to see it. WWE will know they want to see it. It's just a matter of when and how they get to see it. While they might have been mistaken maybe for pulling the plug on Bloodline too early or the way they did over time, instead they could simply focus on WWE's tried and tested and money-making machine in hopes that it'll return to a more prosperous, profitable, and popular future. Then we can decide to, bring it all back. More money for WWE because that's what they need, and we all want to buy a fresh new t-shirt. And that's it for another video. Do you miss the Bloodline, or was it time for WWE to call it quits? Does the MFT group not hit the same, or does it do something new and different? You can let us know your answers in the comments below. Yo, watch this whole video? Thank you so much. Why don't you hit the like button, share the link, and subscribe to Sportskeeda Wrestling for more videos just like this. Also, check out our other videos that go diving deep into these topics just like this. This has been Sportskeeda Wrestling. Acknowledge us.